Well, hello there, everyone. Welcome back to another video. And I thought, it was funny. This idea kind of popped in my head, and I was like, you know what? There's just some things that scales can't teach you. I've never really actually done a video about this exact concept, but a lot of things just kind of clicked for me all of a sudden, and I was like, you know what? That's a good video idea. Well, at least I think it's good. You guys can be the ones who decide on that. But I want to talk about something that, scales will never teach you on guitar. At least in my opinion, you could have a different, idea about melodic structure and all that kind of stuff. But I remember there was this computer program that tried to, play music. It created music on its own, and it just sounded like noise. And I think that's kind of what can happen when we rely too much on the scales. Now, first of all, let me say that I think scales and chord triads and all that kind of stuff, cage system, which I don't know the cage system, but I know like my basic scales and all that stuff and triads. That stuff I think is all extremely important, but what it never teaches us is how to be melodic, how to, insert that groove into our playing, how to do all this stuff. That stuff all comes from just learning and hearing lots of other music and then trying to emulate it and stuff like that. And what happens is, and I know this from teaching from years and years and years, and I'm never trying to put anybody down with this, but I come across a lot of people who know how to know the scales. They're like, I know my theory, I know scales and all that stuff, but it just doesn't sound like music whenever I play it. It just sounds like a scale. And this is a huge hurdle for everyone. And the idea is like, well, I have the scale, I'm playing all the right notes, it's over the chords, it's all this kind of stuff, but why doesn't it sound like anything? And that's because the missing part of that puzzle is all up here. You are the one that's control of the scale. Think of the scale as really nothing more than kind of a roadmap on the fingerboard to be like, oh, these notes sound good together, but it's all about your delivery. There's so much left for interpretation if you just know the scale or the chord shapes or stuff like that. So the biggest part of that puzzle is you. What do you want it to sound like? And the struggle is, well, how do we make it sound like anything? How do we make it not just sound, I'm like, where's my pickup at Select Rat? How do we make it not just sound like this? That doesn't sound like music. And then, what people will run into is they try to like, well, play it slower. Still doesn't sound like music. But if you can insert different kinds of rhythmic ideas and really think like vocal, I tell you, one of the best things I ever did, and who knows, maybe you're listening to this and you're like, God, Robert, you have no melody when you play. But it's something I work on, but it was honestly learning vocal melodies. Literally, like think about what is like the key part of most songs, especially pop songs. Like I actually learned a lot of Mariah Carey and Whitney Houston and all these, amazing singers. I would learn some of their stuff and realize, one, how simple they were being, and two, how cool they were being sometimes. They knew when to like kind of turn it up and all that stuff. And I've talked about this in other videos, but you almost never hear a singer, go like, in the middle of a phrase, like, you will guitar players. And there's nothing wrong with, the shreddy stuff, and that's really where, definitely the scales come in handy there. But as you learn it, you figure out how simple and melodic they're being. So like, for example, if we took, 3 notes out of our G major scale, right there, I'm just walking right up the scale, 1, 2, 3. Now, if you just play it like that, it doesn't sound like much. How can we make it sound like something? Well, this is where you have to play some different rhythms. And one thing I found that honestly helps a lot sometimes, if you're trying to come up with a melody part, and this definitely helps the more you know your scale, it helps kind of free you up from this stuff, but it's honestly playing with your eyes closed. It might sound weird, but what happens is we play so much with our eyes. Once you've learned your scales like that, you play and hear a lot with your eyes, if that makes sense. And we really need to be using our ears. So when you close your eyes, You know, you might sit there and like clunk around a little bit. I know I do. But you'll come up with a melody. In this instance, it might not be as effective because there's only 3 notes. But you might be able to kind of like fish around and you'll find notes because you're listening with your ears at that point, not your eyes. Your eyes are telling you like, oh, I know this shape, I know this shape, I know this shape. But if you just sit there and really listen, sometimes you piece stuff together a little bit differently. So if I had that... Boom, and we're starting to get a melody now. And... Okay, now obviously if I add more notes to the scale, I can really, you know, expand that. You know, different ways of kind of like connecting and stuff. What chord you would kind of choose to go to. A really important thing when you are kind of venturing into this world of melody and all that stuff, note dynamics is so important. The way your note is being delivered to someone. You know, don't always use your pick. Don't always use your fingers. Do all these different things. You know, use a whammy bar. There's so many different tools. I think it's important to make sure that you're not delivering the notes the same way all the time, because it can give you a lot. Even just playing your scale. So if I did like a G minor pentatonic scale, oh, maybe if I had my volume on. Okay, there's my scale. Okay, obviously there was not much variation there. I palm muted a little bit there at the end, out of habit. But you know, I could kind of play with my fingers and get a different sound. And I'm not gonna play this straight scale, but if I, you know, if I want to play a melody line, you know, okay, that was with my pick. Now with my finger, whole different sound to it, you know. See, anytime I use my fingers, I tend to be much more melodic, because with a pick, you know, you have all those picking exercises you've worked on forever, and you're ready to go at the drop of a hat. But when I'm just using my fingers, I'm much more intuitive of like the melody. And I just tend to kind of like chill. You know, all the different things you can do. That to me, that kind of has like almost like a wah style to it or something like that. But that's just another thing that you really consider into the mix of it all. But my point about this is, obviously, like I said, learning the scales is really helpful, because then once you have the melodies, it can help kind of paint a picture of where to go, and your fingers have a better understanding of the fingerboard. Now, to me, when you're learning a scale, a really, really important thing to do with it, and this is something that my fretboard decoder course really has to do with and all that stuff, but is you need to learn how to navigate that scale in a lot of different ways. Don't just play your G major scale like this. Don't just play it like this. You know, play it diagonally with octave. Play it the other way. Play it this way. Oh, all the way up the scale. The more ways you can play it, the more free your hand is. So there's so many working parts to this kind of a topic, but it all ties in together. Knowing the scale, super helpful. But, you know, also depending on your ear, really helpful as well. And then obviously you can have a lot of theory behind it, to where when you're over a certain chord, maybe you're doing like a blues shuffle or something. Maybe when you go to the 4, you outline the chord. See, you can still be melodic even with that, and you know, then I'm kind of outlining the chord more than just focusing on the scale itself. But there's so much you can do with it. It's just, make sure that you put as much time and practice into learning things that are melodic, understanding different rhythms, different grooves, all this kind of stuff. And it's going to help you so much because it's just something that scales don't teach you. You know, scales kind of teach you the notes to play with the melodies, with the groove and all that stuff. You need both in there. Well, I mean, I guess there's people who probably don't know scales who can still play melodically, but I feel like if you don't understand how to play with melody, you don't ever learn melodies and stuff like that, it's hard to play with them. So learn some things that maybe aren't, you know, guitar licks, or learn some instrumental music or something like that. Like Andy Timmons is a great example of having a very vocal, you know, melodic quality to his lines and all that stuff. So just something to think about. I figured I'd throw this up here. And, you know, hopefully it was helpful, guys. So until next time, I will be bouncing on out of here, and I will see you later. Peace out, homies. Whoop!